Well, welcome. We are in week 4 of Zweig Group's Elevate AEC, the virtual experience. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us on this Thursday. Today we have 3 young, very impressive professionals from the design industry who are going to be helping walk us through today's panel titled The 2% A Conversation with Young Principals. I know we all look real young to everyone out there, and what we're classifying as young is under 40, and in fact most of us are at that 35 or under age. So this group truly does represent that 2% of professionals who are owners in their firms that are young. We'll call it young, not quite millennials. I know that's the term that a lot of people want to throw around out there. But today we have, I'm going to do a quick introduction for our panelists, and then I'll let them do a brief introduction of themselves. We have Ryan Hill. Ryan is the Vice President of Land Development down at Shield Engineering in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. He's a registered engineer and works on complex projects across the state of Texas, including drainage rehabilitation, floodplain analysis and reclamation, etc. We also have Jessica Hester. Jessica is the principal architect and CEO of REDI, or Resource Design, an architecture firm located here in Northwest Arkansas. Jessica's experience as an architect and realtor allows her to help mold the built environment in ways that elevate the quality of life for anyone who interacts with their spaces. She integrates research, analysis, and design to create thoughtful solutions for their clients. Last but certainly not least is Gordon Green. Gordon is co-founder of Patel Green and Associates, also known as PGA. He serves as the executive vice president, working out of their Bartow or Tampa office. He works on transportation projects across the state of Florida and enjoys golf and barbecue. He's also, most notably perhaps, a Tampa Bay Devil Rays fan. And last night, I believe, Gordon, they evened the series up at 1-1. Is that correct?
They did. It reduced my sleep time a little bit, but they're not playing tonight, so I can catch up some.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Gordon, go ahead and start. We'll let you do a brief introduction, who you are and how you got to PGA.
Yeah, well, the introduction you gave kind of gave a lot of the details there. We started the company back in 2011. Hiram Patel and I did, and so that's how I got there, I guess. We started it from scratch, just he and I, and we focus a lot on FDOT and cities and counties, really, like you said, across the state of Florida. We've just been getting after it since 2011, coming up on our 10-year anniversary next summer. So yeah, excited to be on this panel. Hopefully share some information that's helpful to folks, and go Rays.
Great. Well, PGA is an impressive firm. In that short time, they've grown from 2 drainage ditch engineers to an 85-person firm who works hand in hand with Florida DOT and works on a lot of complex projects. So big shout out to you guys. Jessica.
Yeah. So I agree. Your introduction was quite accurate. So I've been at REDI since January 1st of this year. Prior to that, I owned a small bespoke firm in Northwest Arkansas, which was actually the second firm I owned. Prior to that, I owned a firm in Georgia that allowed me to eject and move here closer to family. REDI is an interesting firm in the fact that we have two arms. So one arm is a national retail arm, and then the other is a bespoke local project arm. And we enjoy doing both. It keeps things very interesting. And we are currently 15 employees.
All right, Ryan, how's it going down in Fort Worth?
Yeah, so yeah, you do good introduction on me as well. I might be a little bit more on the traditional side on the ownership transition. I was actually offered ownership back in 2018. We started back in 2009. Two owners, Craig and Jean Marie, and brought me on board two and a half years after that. Worked for the firm for 8 years, and then was given the opportunity to come on board as an owner and a VP of land development. The company itself, we do a lot of private work, but we also do municipal infrastructure design, water sewer rehab, roadway rehab stuff, and then on the land development side, we do a lot of single family land development and commercial side as well. So,
perfect. Well, welcome. In my role as sort of the director of ownership transition at Zweig Group, work a lot with perhaps maybe it's the other side of the table on a traditional internal ownership transition. A lot of our clients are bringing us in to kind of develop that conversation and figure out how they can retire. In fact, I think our survey this last year showed that a little over 80% of owners in the industry are over the age of 50, which is kind of staggering when you think about the amount of turnover that's going to happen at that level in organizations across the U.S. And one of the things that I've always found interesting is maybe the reluctance to bring people into an ownership position for one reason or another. And maybe Gordon, we'll start with you, just because you were working for a larger, maybe regional firm, and kind of felt that you were bumping up against that ceiling that I think that so many people and young professionals in the industry have that sort of dynamic working. What would be some advice that you would give to a firm owner, a founder, or somebody who is looking to offer that ownership component or work through how to get their staff motivated to come into that next level of their professional career?
So it was easy for us. We've actually started to do that. We've started our transition, Hiron and I, through going to some things like this, started to understand that, if we were going to wait till we were in our 50s to start transitioning, especially on the growth trajectory we had, there's no way we'd be able to do it. The math didn't even come close to working. So a couple of years ago, we decided to get that transition going. And it was tedious to work through all of the paperwork and working with attorneys and stuff like that. But in terms of identifying the folks that we were going to include, that was easy. So if you're a firm owner, founder, whatever, and you're trying to look out for folks to take over, I'm hoping that you've probably already, just watching folks work and working with them, you know easily who those folks are, who are the ones that you have a hard time imagining everything getting done without them, and who can you imagine stepping in and doing what you're doing if you can't do it anymore. So fortunately for us, we just had a lot of folks that fit that bill, and we were excited to bring 6 more in and a few more this year. And, starting as early as we did, I'm 38 now. I guess I was probably 36, 37 when we started that. Hopefully that gives us enough time to get that transition done.
I think you're well ahead of the curve on that. And real quick, I do want to let everybody know that if you have a question or a comment, please use the Q&A field down in the bottom of your Zoom screen. We want this to be a conversation where people can chime in at any point in time throughout the broadcast today. Jessica, you had kind of mentioned that you're somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. You've started a few firms, and then you also took the leap of faith here at the beginning of 2020. What a time to come into your new role as the CEO of Reedy Design. But talk a little bit about how you've sort of weighed the risk and reward of ownership and leading in a firm like Reedy.
So I would start to answer that question by saying that according to every personality test that I've done in leadership training, I have no sense of risk. So I am not adverse to risk in any capacity. I think that the thing that motivates me is watching my team have a really great time and do really great work. And the results that we get with our clients really makes everything worthwhile. And that risk reward was less about money or timing or anything else. It was more about what can I build and what can I do with this that will provide a better community for my home.
Perfect. And over to you, Ryan. You had mentioned that you're probably more on the traditional path. You worked at Shield, you put in your time, put in the sweat equity. And, I think when we were talking the other day, you were sort of the voice of the people prior to becoming an owner. Maybe talk a little bit about your leadership style as a project manager, senior project manager, and how that maybe sets you apart from the rest of the team to come into an ownership position.
Sure. Yeah. So I've always been in the camp of, I lead from the front. So, I first in, last out a lot of days, and just kind of showing the younger staff, what it takes to succeed and to be in the position that I've been so blessed to be in. It's kind of neat. You got the younger guys looking up, guys and gals looking up, seeing, someone that's 34 years old, getting brought into an ownership group and being given, a leadership position. It's been pretty neat to see. And kind of what Jessica was saying is, we all are in the A&E industry. We all get to build things, and that's what we enjoy to do. And one of my favorite things to build is people. And, that's kind of the coolest thing that we get to do. And again, the people to be able to see that, if you put in hard work and, you do all the right things, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can be given an opportunity. Here at Shield and assuming, these other companies as well, you can be given that opportunity. And that's a great sales pitch, when you're talking to younger kids, trying to get them to come over here. And that's kind of been our big thing is, you're given as much rope as you want here. And then that's been great for us. So.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions coming in, but before we jump over to those, I do want to talk about, we're here to talk about the age component and that we're noticeably younger than a lot of the other people in the room, whether that's at a city council meeting, whether that's a board meeting, or whether that's inside of your own firm with your peers. Maybe each of you guys can talk about a time where you weren't maybe taken seriously, or your age was sort of a lever point for someone to pass you off, or an idea off as not relevant. And how did you guys overcome that? We can start, whoever's got the most relevant one, I guess. Looks like she's smirking. We'll pass to Jessica.
Well, I'm smirking because for me, it's not just about age, it's also about gender. And so my response is, at least the first one that came to mind, is walking onto a job site and trying to convince a contractor who is probably substantially older than I am and has been doing it longer that my idea is really good and it's going to work. And also, sometimes being the only female next to, in a group of entirely male folks can be a challenge. And so I think one of the approach that I've taken to handle that is largely collaboration. And I think if I bring everyone on board and that we're doing this together, it's not just me, I might have a good idea and I really want you to implement it. But if you have a response that maybe makes it better or makes it easier or less expensive, let's work on that together. And I think collaboration helps a lot in those instances.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Since starting PGA, of course, I haven't faced much of that. I guess when you're kind of the boss, people, at least they fake like they don't think you are clueless. But I still get, at least early on, we get it out in industry at different functions, especially early on. When we started, I was 29 and probably looked 24. So any idea I would have was fairly quickly shot down. But I kind of learned early. I was one of those that just learned really quickly. In a company that I worked with before PGA, which was PBS&J for most of that career before they ended up getting acquired by Atkins. We're a lot like we're trying to be. They, like, if you could do the job, they let you do it. And so I, would get opportunities maybe beyond my quote unquote years of experience, and inevitably I'd end up on some team or working with someone that was kind of new, and I'd get that right. I would say this is what we should do, or here's my idea, and it would kind of get shot down because I looked young or whatever. So I already kind of learned to just let that go, let it play out, just like in life. No sense in getting mad about something like that. We'll all get to the right answer eventually, even if you got to do the wrong thing for you realize that was right to begin with.
Yeah, and again, my situation was more of the traditional route. So, rising up through the ranks, you bet, caused chips on some shoulders for older employees that have been in the company just as long, or been in the industry even longer, substantially longer than me, 10 plus years. Definitely caused some animosity and some issues internally. But again, I've always led from the front, and I've always thought that actions speak louder than words. So I've always just kind of, that can't be done. Well, I'm sure it can. I'll show you. And, over time, organically, I guess it's kind of, it settles itself out. So, but yeah, I think all of us have dealt with some kind of age discrimination at some point in our careers. So it's nothing new.
Yeah, if it's not one challenge, it's another. Certainly seems like as leaders and owners and organizations, you guys will have plenty more in front of you, and they'll probably just change. The dynamic will change over time. I had a question come in. Somebody kind of wants to talk a little bit about the buy-in process, perhaps the difference in perspective of maybe a more seasoned professional who would be buying in, and how they perceive that process versus a younger individual, and what that investment looks like to them, whether we're bonusing shares, whether they're bringing some money to the table. And I don't know, Gordon, since you guys have kind of got your plan in action, you don't need to air it all out, but how are you guys approaching that at PGA?
Well, it's always good to have some skin in the game, right? So the 6 that we brought in, we're definitely buying in, but we of course helped them out at the same time. We enabled them to use their bonuses, made sure that that was a big help to them, and then for those that we maybe offered a little bit more opportunity to buy in, they had to come up with that. And so, yeah, there was some back and forth there, figuring out what made the most sense for where we were at value wise, but we made it work. And so we've got a good plan moving forward.
And Jessica, yours is a little unique in that you kind of bought out a founder or took over that role. Maybe you have your own thoughts on how that might work.
Yeah, I would definitely say that our process was non-traditional. And so we're actually in an agreement that's more of an employment agreement and a long-term mentorship role that doesn't require a ton of effort on the previous owner's part, but does allow him to be here if a client needs him, or if we want his input on design or any other processes, he's available for that, but he gets paid out over a long-term buyout through an employment agreement.
Perfect. Ryan, how's it going down at Shield?
Yeah, so when I bought in, I was the first one period to ever do it. So you and I kind of joked the other day, Will. We decided in January that I was going to purchase shares, and I was going to become an owner, and didn't happen until May. Between January and May, we had to set up all the legal agreements, rewrite the company documents, all the other things you don't think about. And we both were ready to do it in January, and it took 6 months to make it happen. But I used personal debt, so I took out a loan, and I guess they have loan options out there for it. But since then, we've identified the next group of employees that, are in the vetting ground for becoming owners someday. And we've created an associates program to where it's a deferred comp plan, and it's a way for them to amass some money for us to share some of the wealth with them. And also eventually, hopefully give them an opportunity to access some capital to buy in future shares. So it's kind of a reward as well as hopefully a finance tool down the road.
Yeah, I love it. It's a near-term incentive with an option at the end, or later on down the road to access some of that capital to make that investment. It's a little less scary, I guess, at that point. And I did want to pull up a stat from our principals, partners, and owners survey on this topic about having some skin in the game. We always segment the data by a lot of different demographic information, but on the growth side, we asked people if they either borrowed money or used their own money for a down payment to buy into the firm. And when you look at this from a fast growth to slow, stable, down to declining, 68% of fast growth firms, the principals said they brought money to the table. That decreased to 44%, 18%, down to 17% as you kind of go down the line. So I think when you're talking about the culture of ownership at your firm and what it means to be an owner and what you guys are trying to do, sort of defining what is that 5-year vision and where are we trying to go, that having some of that skin in the game, I think, is a motivator for people. What's, there's, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of challenges, certainly being the youngest person in the room at some point, but as a leader, as a CEO, as the face of the firm, what's your biggest challenge right now?
Mine personally is the work-life balance. Being young, a lot of us are starting families or have families, so that's definitely a struggle. Being, I got 2 little ones at the house, and I also have 37 employees to help guide here at the office. So that's always a challenge for me.
I'd say the same thing. You kind of sent us a few warm-up questions, and that was the first thing I thought of immediately was time. It's hard to find the time to keep everything in our lives in balance. When we started, let's see, that was 2011. I had a 3 and a 5-year-old. And so I don't know that I heard the term work-life balance. I'm sure it was talked about back then, but it certainly wasn't talked about as much as it is now. And so we've thought about it a lot recently because it's really important to folks, work-life balance. And I've come to the conclusion that everybody should define their own work-life balance. Everybody should be different. Or not should be, it is. Everybody's is different. And mine's just work heavy. I like to work. I like my work. And I enjoy it, but I love my family and my church and like to do some other things at the same time. So that is by far the biggest challenge, is trying to devote some time to each of those other things and prioritizing them properly. Because if you don't, it'll be like the first several years of us starting PGA. It'll just absolutely consume every bit of your time if you let it. Which was probably okay up front because you're doing something important. Not that it's more important than your family and that sort of thing, but I definitely let that go way longer than I should have, out of balance. And I think I've done a better job here recently, but it just makes it harder to get everything done at the office that you want to get done. But at the same time, that can be a good thing too, because it kind of forces you to delegate and find someone to help you, and it gives them opportunities to participate in leadership and a lot of these things, which I'm getting a lot better about that as well as things have gone along. I wasn't always very good at that, but getting better, trying to.
I would also reiterate the work-life balance, but since it's already been talked about eloquently, I would my biggest challenge inside the office is personalities. And as we grow, figuring out how we communicate with one another in a way that's productive and helpful. And, everyone's different. Everyone has different takes on things. You can write an email and mean it one way and it gets interpreted a whole different way. And so how do we work together and grow as a team and grow in our friendship with one another as well? So that's the thing we're working on these days.
We had another question come in. Or Gordon, do you have something?
I was totally agreeing with Jessica. That's a very good point.
Yeah. Yep. Question came in, and maybe Gordon, you can start with this, or we can figure out how to deal with it. But how would you guys approach a superior that was threatened by you, or yourself as, you are the younger, and I'm using this verbatim, younger, more badass, more technologically relevant version of themselves? How did you resolve this? And sort of what's the trigger to say, I'm going to go start my own super team and set up my own shingle?
Yeah. I think you asked me to do
Tough.
the answer first, right?
Sure.
I don't know that I ever really faced that, the whole being threatened by me by any means. UBS&J was a great company. There's a lot of folks still over there. It's Atkins now. A lot of folks still there that are still great. And feel like I don't feel like I was ever put down like that, really. So I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know if I could put up with that. So I guess I agree in that sense. I'm just fortunate I didn't have to deal with it. As far as when it's time to bail, that's a pretty loaded question. Don't do it for that. Here's my answer. Don't do it for that. Do not do it because you feel picked on or underappreciated or put down. If that's your only reason for starting your own company, don't. You gotta have a passion for bringing folks together and building something new and awesome. You have to. There's a lot of other good reasons to start your own company. Don't let it just be about that. If that's the only reason, I would just find a different place to work where people appreciate you no matter how old you are, how young you are.
I agree with that answer wholeheartedly. I don't even think I have anything to add to that.
Same.
Yeah. For us at Zweig Group, again, we work with a lot of clients on strategic planning, ownership transition planning, and part of the request or the ask by a lot of upcoming professionals that have that 5 to 10 year experience level is they want more training, they want more professional development. How do you guys, how important was that to you to get to the point that you are today, to have access to whether it was resources provided by the firm or whether you went and did it on your own? How did you guys approach that dynamic to get yourselves to this level in your career?
Yeah, so at Shield, I've kind of been the spearheading a Shield University in air quotes. We kind of got the same feedback from some of the younger EITs that they want a manual, they want checklists, they want check boxes to follow. Which I know we all kind of have our own views of that in general, but we gave them the information. We have a formal CAD training program now. We have design manuals that they can go through, and just giving them the lifeline, I think, has changed the whole psyche of the bullpen, or we call it the bullpen. That's where production staff is. But I think it's important, and I think most important to me, growing up in my career, is I wanted to know what the next steps were to get to the end game goal. And the CEO and myself have sat down and, all the way from internship all the way through to if you want to be a project manager and beyond, we have a step-by-step milestone kind of what you need to do throughout your career to get there. And I think just giving that to them visually has made a huge difference. And it works both ways. A lot of people see, you know, maybe I don't want to be a project manager. I didn't realize that they're responsible for all these things. I just want to be a project engineer, which is a different track, you know, that we have on there. And that transparency has really been crucial for us in vetting future owners, but as well as, you know, letting people decide what they really want to do with their career.
So for us, we when I came in January, I flipped the firm upside down. So they've never used a BIM software. They've never had to do timesheets. The list goes on and on. And so introducing an immense amount of technology in a very short amount of time has been super overwhelming to a lot of the staff that have been here for almost 30 years. And so we've done, I mean, the training processes they're in depth. I mentioned before we got on the call, the training is happening in the room next door. We do a lot of training here. For me personally, throughout my career, it's always been self-motivated. I wanted to be on the cutting edge of everything. I also want to be the kind of leader that knows how to do it myself. I don't want to just force someone else who's a staff member to pick up a new piece of software or a new idea or thought and run with it on their own if I can't back them up or help or at least empathize when we get frustrated. So that's the MO around the office here is if you're learning to do it, I'm also learning to do it, and we'll figure it out together.
Yeah, I don't think we do anything novel. We try to get folks trained up, obviously focusing more on the younger folks. So, you know, we do those external trainings, but our biggest, most valuable stuff is stuff we do one-on-one, which is one of the reasons we're kind of looking forward to transitioning folks back into the office after all this working from home. Our folks have done a really great job sharing screens and staying in touch with each other and helping each other out. But you can only do so much, right? We try to do a real good job of balancing our staff where we have senior designers, senior engineers that have that teacher's heart that are always ready to help out the young folks that are trying to learn. I like the idea of that the university. We don't have anything like that, but we do have some committees. We have small groups set up that think through like best practices so that we can share that information, because we were starting to see a lot, especially with the 3D modeling that we're doing, is a team over here is doing a 3D model for a project and maybe getting frustrated. And then towards the end of that project, you know, maybe someone else starts to do a QC review and they say, oh, well, you know, if you do it this way, it's a lot easier. I'm like, oh my goodness, we got to get something in place where that happens earlier. And so, I mean, for months now, we've been doing that. So hopefully that'll mitigate some of that, and we'll all benefit from each other as we learn, especially with new 3D modeling. I think like on Jessica's end, they've been doing BIM in that industry for a little bit longer than us. For roads, it's still kind of new to everyone. So we're still very much figuring it out.
Had another question come in here, kind of about the age of ownership and what might be too young. I think all four of us came out of college and into our careers, or sort of the next level of education, during the Great Recession of 2007 through 2009. I mean, that period, this industry was decimated, and there was a exodus of talented individuals, architects going to work as baristas and never coming back to the profession. So there is there's a gap here. There's a talent gap that I think has been addressed frequently throughout conversations with just about anybody you talk to. When you looked at, certainly last year, the talent gap and the retention issue with a lot of firms, we're going to have to be thinking about ownership differently than the generation before us because of that issue. And this question here specifically is asking for an age. When do you think someone's too young for ownership? Throw it out there.
I don't think it's specific to age. I think it's specific to personality and drive and ambition and passion and all of those other things that make someone want to do this, right? This is a grind. It can be really rewarding, but it's a lot of work. And so if you're not super passionate about it and headed in a direction that fulfills you, then it won't feed you, won't feed your soul. So to me, it's not about age. It's truly about you and your gut.
Yeah, I agree with Jessica. We're pretty progressive on the most part. So I wouldn't think that age would tie somebody down. And we have EITs that we've already selected as, someday we just know they're going to be, either ownership or right there at, associate or something similar. So I wouldn't tie it too much to age. Gordon said something pretty profound earlier that, it's, when you know, and you identify these things early on. You just know, when somebody's cut out for it. And our whole model is we try to identify that early, and then we get them in the associates program. It's kind of like the intermediate training ground, so to speak. But I don't know when we would trigger offering the ownership, but I wouldn't think that the age would really matter.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. Once you do see somebody that gets it, and yes, when you get it, you get it. You can be 24 years old. We're not designing rockets, for Pete's sake. The technical part of it, you don't need 20 years to be an absolute master in it. And not that that's even all that important when it comes to ownership. When it comes to ownership, you want someone that really wants to, like in our case, bleed blue and green, right? You want them to be really committed, not only to their profession and to doing a good job, but to the company. They really, really want to see the company succeed. And that means they'll put whatever effort in is needed to make that happen. And you start to see that in people early on. I mean, they either see the culture, really appreciate it, and want to be a part of it forever. Boom, you need to lock them down. Maybe not right away, maybe not when they're that 30-year EI, you're handing them ownership, but that really doesn't have to do so much with their age, as you just, I guess it's more of a feel thing, right? You don't want to mess them up mentally by putting that on them. But even still, man, I mean, if someone came in, they're 23, 24 years old, and you just get the sense that they're super mature, and they get it, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Our gut feels if you can't imagine your company without them, it's probably a pretty good sign. It's time.
I like it. Yeah, we've heard some people refer to it as the X factor. I mean, you just know that somebody has the personality, the traits, the technical skills, the management skills. Some firms have very specific criteria to get people into the ownership level. Some people just rely on that X factor, sort of the gut component. But certainly, one of the expectations of an owner in a firm is the ability to bring in work. Because if we don't have work coming in the door, people can't work. So oftentimes that role is reserved for the owners of the company. Have you guys thought about the criteria for ownership at your firms? And if so, how much does business development and their marketing capabilities kind of play into that?
I'll chime in real quick. We wrote some stuff down, but we basically tailored it to like that group of 6 that we brought in. Like we just basically described what they did, described them and what they brought. And it's stuff that we've been talking about. So I'm not going to try to remember what we wrote down, but it's the X factor. You just basically writing down what that means. In terms of business development, and book of work and all that stuff, that's key, right? I mean, if these folks can market and bring in work, you want to keep them, and that's a way to retain them. But in our first group of owners, we included our financial controller, because she does the work of like 3, and it's, again, can't imagine the company running without her. So she brings in 0 work, but she brings tons of value in a lot of other ways, and we don't want her going anywhere. So she's an owner too.
Awesome.
We haven't sat down and thought about that yet. Hopefully we get a few more months to figure that out. Although there is some need, because we have some rock stars who deserve to be part of this and have skin in the game and feel like they're getting rewarded for that effort that they're putting in. I think that from a business development standpoint, there is an expectation if you're in a role not that is client facing. So maybe unlike the controller or CFO or someone in that position, there is an expectation that you are bringing in work, you're paying for yourself, you're paying for your team to some extent. That is out there, and it's important.
Yeah, we try to sit down and write some things, jot some things down, and you get your list and you start reading through it and you're like, well, that precludes so and so we have to strike that from it. And then you find yourself customizing your list to meet the people that you already know have the X factor. So the whole exercise was, I won't say pointless, but it's kind of funny how it gravitates towards you. End up trying to find an excuse to get these people into your pool. So having said all that, I guess the X factor is pretty much the only thing that we look at right now. All those things come into play. I mean, a book of business definitely helps your X factor number go up, but it wouldn't necessarily preclude somebody.
Sure. I'll throw out a hypothetical here. Somebody wants to know what your thoughts are on joining a partnership with someone who's aged in their career. They're 60 plus. They own 80% of the company and are offering 20%. They don't have a formal transition plan, certainly haven't communicated it. What would be your questions or your hesitations going into that kind of an arrangement?
Don't look good. There's some information we don't have, right? We don't know what the value of the company is and how many people there. I mean, you'd have to work the math. I'd probably ask for some form of transition plan because, 80% of a company, if the person is 60 years old, how much longer they want to work? 5 years. It'd be tough. So then you're faced with your 20%. Now you're going to get sold to somebody else, which might not be in your plan. Anyway, I'd definitely want some more information before I dove into that.
I would want to know if it was if it's looking at like a growth stock, if you think the company's still going to grow exponentially as it has, or is it a flatline investment? Like, what does the company look like 5 years down the road, regardless of what happens to the 80% owner? 1 and 2, I mean, is 80% owner bringing in 80% of the work? Can the company self-sustain with or without them? That's probably my biggest hesitation to it.
I would also want to know how much autonomy you had. Is 80% kind of in name only, like they just get a check and they just do some amount of work, or is it like they want to make all the decisions still and you're kind of along for the ride? So it's your partnership has little to no influence on the trajectory of the company. So I think all of those things, again, need to be answered amongst many others.
Yeah, it's not an easy decision, and it's not a linear formula for sure on how to solve that problem. I had another question come in here, and it relates to compensation and what an individual's expectations are in their roles as an owner. Certainly, when you're in an ownership group, you're married to those people. That's your team. There's very typically there's guidelines and there's rules to the engagement, ways in which you can come in, ways in which you can go out, and so you're stuck with those people for the foreseeable future. And one of the issues that I think comes up quite a bit is how much money an individual is making versus another individual in the organization. What's their role? What's their responsibility, et cetera. The question here is trying to figure out, do you bring somebody into an ownership position or compensate them at a higher level just to retain them? or how do you balance the dynamic between somebody that wants a little more money, but ownership might not be the right seat for them in your organization?
Yeah, that's exactly case in point while we set up that associates program, because you have a lot of people that want, they're high performers, but they may or may not fit the ownership culture. They may not have the X factor like we talked about earlier, or whatever else. So that the associates program for us is kind of our means for sharing a bigger piece of the pie with high performers without having to compromise the ownership team per se. You know, if you know we don't feel like they're ready, or they may not be fit for it. You know, because you hit the nail on the head. It's a marriage. For us, it's a three-way marriage, which, you know, it's very, very
a little weird.
Similar. It is weird, but I mean, that's just how it is. And you don't want to hitch somebody to the wagon necessarily that may or may not be a long-term fit for you.
I think so. There's a lot of strategy in how you pay people inside of a company, right? There's usually a chart and there's rankings, and if you have this title, you get this amount of money. And I think that having that structure is really important, and having it figured out before you start having the conversations about the anomalies is also very important. But we've always come to the place of, if somebody is critical to the process of the company, if they're awesome to be around and have a great attitude, then we're going to figure out a way to make it work. And if that is more compensation, a different title, a different role, then we'll put you in that seat. Now, if you can't cut it, that's a different story, right? Then we have to reevaluate and maybe reassign roles and adjust. And we do a lot of adjustment. So we like to give people an opportunity to jump into something, but we also are not afraid to go, hey, we've done this for 90 days. It ain't the right thing. Let's try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was being too still. My occupancy switch went off. Y'all probably couldn't see that, but I was sitting here in the dark. It was weird. Yeah, what you're talking about is a topic that came up early on as we were preparing to invite the group of 6 in that we did, I guess, year before last. And, you know, same thing, right there. When we think about who we have, and I mean, I think the reason PGA's had the success that we've got is, whereas a lot of firms, you might have, you know, your management, you got a handful of A players, and then everyone else, right? I think what differentiates the companies that are here receiving these awards and are higher achievers is, that group of A players is like most of the company. And so when you think about that test of what does PGA look without this person, and you don't want to think about it, we got a lot of those folks. They're not all necessarily going to be running the company, whether it's just not really in their skill set, it's just not something they want to do or whatever, but they're still extremely valuable to the team. We don't have an associates program like Ryan's talking about, but it's something we have talked about, and that's probably going to be the next big step for us, is figuring out how we want that to look for us, and make a way for those sorts of folks to buy in and benefit more directly from the success of the company, without also requiring them or forcing them into a company running leadership position that they you know, either aren't, you know, set up for or just don't want in the first place. So yeah, that's a good point.
All right, we're getting lots of questions here, guys. This is it's good activity. So the next one is around a topic that comes up frequently in our annual surveys. You know, our best firms to work for survey. Compensation always ranks as one of the lowest satisfaction metrics for employees, for staff, reasonable. But once you kind of get out of the compensation piece, mentorship is another area where the profession, and a lot of firms inside the profession sort of lack, whether it's a formal mentorship program or the personalities inside the firm that actively pursue that activity. Whether it's been inside a firm or outside of the firm, where do you guys go to look for advice when you're talking about things of this nature? Is it, who do you go to? Who's your mentor?
So I have a very strategic circle of advisors, and I've had that for quite some time. My first ownership role, I think I was 25 or 26. So I was quite young. And so having those folks who, some of them are family members who I have a lot of respect for. Some of them are professors that I had over the years, and some of them are business folks that I've met along the way, other architects and other owners. And some of them are ironically clients that I've had. If I have a really tough decision to make, I will circle the wagon and go one-on-one to each of them and say, here's my problem, here's my question, how would you handle this? And collate all of their answers before I make a decision. And that's critical. I think also having mentorship inside of our firm is a really important tool. And we've started to implement a whole process around that because we want our staff to feel like they're also growing. We're all growing together, right? High tides raise all ships, and that's our goal.
Yeah, I'm super fortunate to my main mentor is here, Craig. Long before the ownership was a discussion. He's engineering, business acumen, just across the board. So I'm super blessed on that front. And when you take time to build people, you build a bond, and that bond doesn't break just because people go to different companies. So I still have former supervisors and bosses and whatnot at other companies I still reach out to pretty regular and get input and see how they're doing things. And people are usually pretty open to share information, even though we're competitors and all that stuff. So that's been my main route for mentorship personally. And then within our company, we haven't always been the best at fostering mentorship. In fact, we did an employee survey, and that was the number one thing that came up is a lot of people felt lost. They didn't have a direct report. They didn't have somebody giving them direct training. So we did an active pursuit on trying to fix that. And we have, everybody has a direct report, and then every team has a mentor, an assigned mentor for the team. And I think it's made a huge difference just in morale and just giving everybody access to mentorship has been great for us.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same thing. Been very fortunate over the past, I guess, 9.5 years to bring in several of my mentors from my PBS and J days, not just from a technical aspect, but just leadership and management, just guys that were my bosses or folks that I would go and bounce stuff off to, work for us now, and it's fantastic. So they're right there. It's important. Inside the company, we actually just recently started our own company mentorship program because same thing as Ryan. We do the Zweig survey, we do a few other survey, award deals, and mentorship was by far the most requested. And so we set out to set that up. So yeah, we're at like 85 folks, I think, just about, and we have 66 participants in the program, which I thought was really, really good. And so, yeah, we're just getting started on that. But the idea is, having folks feel welcome if they're new, share information. Hiron and I both participate in it. We're mentors. I signed myself up to be a mentor or a mentee. Hopefully next time I'll get a mentor and I can be the mentee. Because there's always so much to learn. Even with what we're doing now, and I'm a mentor and I have a mentee, I fully intend for it to be two-way, because there's always something to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are getting close to the end of the hour here, so I just want to sort of preface, we've got about 5 minutes left, and anybody who's on that has the premium version, the premium experience M&A Next, will be kicking off directly after this. So you can flip over to that channel here shortly. We've got plenty of other questions that have come in, and we probably won't get to answer all of them in the recorded session here, but we will make an effort to get those out to the panelists so that they can answer those, and we can get those back out to everybody who has signed up for this event. One question here, the previous question, I think, about somebody wanting to come into an ownership role and the owner not having a transition plan, it sounded like there may have already been an offer there. But what advice would you give someone who wants to learn more about the ownership transition plan? How would you approach your superior, or the superior in that case, about just learning more about the activity and what they can do to best position themselves?
Just ask. I mean, I think the direct approach is the best approach. I've been dealing with this on a different situation, and I think truly, like most firms don't have a plan in place. So ask, do you have a plan? What's transition look like? What's the path to becoming an associate or a partner, owner? Can we sit down and talk about it? Just ask.
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean, and it plants to see too that you're interested, which is invaluable to the ownership team too. I mean, I would love to know who all is interested in ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask and they're squirming about sharing the information, then there's your red flag.
That's all it takes. Yeah, I think you're right, Gordon, is just watch the response to the question, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of what you need to do. Another question, kind of flipping the script here, less about ownership, more about what your firms are doing right now from a technology standpoint. You know, we've got Zoom, we've got all the different platforms for communication, but has your company found something, a piece of technology to be especially helpful in this time, and what is that?
We've been using a lot of Bluebeam for markups, digital markups. You know, a lot of us are pretty old school and preferred printout sets and markup by hand, but obviously with the COVID, it's been tough to do that. So we've adopted the Bluebeam markup protocol, I guess, and it's been super helpful for us.
I wish Bluebeam had a Mac version. They don't. I found that out recently. But the software that we've introduced recently that's been super helpful is Monograph, which is a cloud-based time tracking and project management software that allows the entire team to see what everyone is working on at the same time and how that affects cash flow and overhead. And I think that transparency has been really helpful for everyone as they're sitting in their silos in the world.
Yeah, so we got a few things. We do use Bluebeam. It's a love-hate relationship. Just about the time I just hate how slow it is, I'll do a QC in a Bluebeam session, and I'll go, oh, okay, that's why I love it. I remember now. So we do use Bluebeam. We recently started with ProjectWise. So with everybody working remotely more, we're in 3 offices, we're winning bigger and bigger projects, more sub-consultants. It just finally started to make more sense for us to, well, how about said something somewhat crude, but pay Bentley more money, which I didn't think was possible, but we did it. But we've hired a director of technology who's very, very proficient in ProjectWise. So we're going to get our value out of that investment. So looking forward to that. And then the last thing is Teams, which I think everybody's using Teams. So the messaging and all that stuff's good. Everybody's doing that, but we recently really started to dig into the planner. And so we've got like discipline groups on Teams, like I'm sure most folks do. So like for our drainage Teams channel, we've got a planner tab, and so we load a bunch of tasks in there and you can assign it to folks. And we're just kind of getting into that to see how efficient and useful it is. But so far, it's been really neat and useful to see that, because folks can check it off. They can go find something that's not assigned and grab it, and keeps everybody busy, keeps work getting done.
Perfect. Well, we are at the noon hour here in the Central Time Zone. So we will go ahead and we'll respect everyone's time. Certainly want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining. And a big shout out to Jessica, Gordon, and Ryan for participating today. If anybody wants to ask any additional questions, I think our contact information is on the website, and we will direct questions to each of the panelists today to see if we can get a little more information out to you guys. So thank you again so much for joining us. And if you do have premium, flip over to the M&A next. It's going to be an awesome session. If not, we'll see you guys next week here at Elevate AEC, the virtual experience. So thank you guys.